You're inside your body. Stretched neurons track bladder filling while you walk and don't feel it pile up. Your bladder texts the brainstem, guards two kidneys at ureter doors, negotiates each void, March imaging highlighted enzyme work hiding in plain sight. But no one knows every backstage bladder signal, so here are 7 weird bladder side jobs besides holding pee. Number 1. Fullness signals. Picture a water balloon that also has a mood ring, and as urine arrives from the ureters, the wall stretches. That distension fires afferent nerve fibers. Pelvic and hypogastric pathways carry volume and tension to your spinal cord and brain. Your voluntary pathways still gate, whether the external urethral sphincter and motor roots let the void happen. Stretch is only half the conversation. The urothelium and the tissue underneath are not passive wallpaper. They take part in a mechanotransduction. They release signaling molecules when stretch hits, nudging nearby nerves and smooth muscle. The bladder is highly compliant, meaning you can add a lot of volume without pressure exploding like it would in a rigid pipe. So holding is partly engineering in the wall, not only a sphincter stunt. Pain and urgency are not the same channel. Irritation from something like an infection can make the same fill level feel like a 5-alarm fire. When urgency runs ahead of volume, you are in overactive bladder territory. Population estimates vary by definition, but the symptom pattern is common enough that continence societies have whole vocabularies for it. The game is intermittent emptying, not a slow drip. Timing is everything. After spinal cord injury, sensation and voluntary control can split apart, which is why storage and emptying get managed with specialized care. Normal life is a gradual urge as you fill. When that pattern goes sideways, clinicians sometimes map it with a voiding diary. In specialty care, urodynamics chart pressure, volume, and sensation thresholds, and so yes, it holds pee and it will not let you forget it. Number 2. Kidney security. But here's the thing, urine does not stay one way because gravity waved a wand. At the ureterovesical junction, each ureter tunnels obliquely through the bladder wall, and when you void, intravesical pressure climbs. That pressure squeezes the intramural ureter like a flap valve, so urine is far less likely to jet backward toward the kidneys. The trigon, that smooth triangle between the 2 ureter openings and the internal urethral neck, is the anatomical map pin urologists know by heart. Ureteral peristalsis still delivers boluses downstream, storage waits, then the squeeze happens and the one-way teamwork shows its hand. When that anti-reflux system fails, as in vesicoureteral reflux, often a pediatric imaging story, you slide into that territory. Kidney infections become a real risk there for susceptible people. You do not feel reflux in the grocery line. Pediatric urology often finds it with imaging. When recurrent febrile UTIs or other clues make specialists look, studies like avoiding cysterothrogram appear. Breakdown of that anti-reflux barrier is part of why pyelonephritis risk climbs in vulnerable patients. Still, every time you pee, your bladder briefly becomes a pressurized room, and part of its job is bouncer for the kidneys. Would you really bet the flap valve alone beats gravity every time without that oblique ureter tunnel doing the quiet work? Number 3. Brain negotiation. Deciding to pee sounds like you flexed one muscle and called it a day. And in reality, voiding is a micturition reflex braided with voluntary control. During storage, sympathetic tone and somatic input to the external urethral sphincter favor keeping the door closed. When it is time to go, parasympathetic drive helps the detrusor contract while outlet resistance drops in a coordinated sequence. Modulation runs through your brainstem, including pontine centers and higher brain areas that care about privacy, timing, and dignity. Fill ramps afferent firing near threshold. Those centers either permit the reflex or tell you to wait. Bedwetting in kids is not a character flaw. It is immaturity of this circuitry plus sleep arousal still under construction. Stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, spinal cord injury, each can scramble the negotiation and leave you with retention, urgency, incontinence, or odd neurogenic patterns. Early after cord injury, you can see spinal shock. Later, reflex bladder patterns emerge. Same organ, different wiring. Your bladder is the effector, the manager spans cord and brain, yet the organ never decides alone. It stays in conference with your brainstem. Number 4. Living lining. But here's the catch. The inner surface is urothelium, transitional epithelium built for abuse. Superficial umbrella cells and tight junctions cut down permeability. Apical uroplaque and rich plaques are part of that barrier story. The lining stretches and relaxes with every fill cycle, handling osmotic and chemical stress from urine exposure. One of the rougher gigs for a mucosal surface. When infection or injury disrupts it, irritation and permeability risk jump, which is part of why urinary tract infections are so familiar in clinical practice. Risk climbs with anatomy, pregnancy, sexual activity, menopause, catheters, and more. Interstitial cystitis and bladder pain syndrome remind us that barrier and sensory hypotheses are still debated. Clinicians discuss everything from glycosaminoglycan layer ideas to diet triggers, and the science is messier than a soundbite. The pink layer is alive, not plastic. The bladder does not filter blood. The kidneys do. While the bladder hosts what they sent downstream with immune crosstalk in the wall, and it tries not to let chaos spread. High maintenance security detail, not wallpaper. If you're finding this interesting, consider subscribing because I drop videos like this regularly anyway. Number 5. Pelvic floor team. Continence is a group project, really a duet between the storage organ, the outlet, and the support structures that anchor your urethra and bladder neck. When you cough, sneeze, laugh, or land a jump, intra-abdominal pressure spikes. The bladder is the pressured reservoir. The pelvic floor, internal and external sphincters, and supportive connective tissue at the bladder neck and urethra have to answer in time. Reflexive and voluntary pelvic floor contraction bumps outlet resistance so the laugh does not become a leak when the system is intact. Stress urinary incontinence, leakage with those pressure events, is common in women, especially after childbirth and through menopause. The numbers swing depending on which study you read, but the clinical pattern is familiar worldwide. Men have their own story after prostate surgery. Weak sphincter alone is not the whole script. Support anatomy and the timing of contractions matter. Strong abs, sneaky leak. Pressure finds the weakest link. Your bladder is the water balloon. Your pelvic floor is the hand on the neck. Same team, different job titles. Number 6, pressure teammate. However, most people never clock this teammate job. Valsalva, a heavy lift, a hard cough, anything that jacks intra-abdominal pressure turns the cavity into a squeezed juice box. The bladder sitting in the pelvis feels that broadcast. Coordinated outlet resistance is what keeps the extra pressure from becoming an accident. When coordination or support falters, you get stress leakage. This is not the organ pushing food through when you strain on the toilet. Valsalva raises pressure everywhere. Stool exit is colorectal business. Obstetric teaching still fusses over when the bladder is emptied during labor and with epidurals because timing affects comfort and monitoring, not because the bladder moonlights as a forklift. Chronic straining from constipation can drag the pelvic floor into dysfunction in people who chronically strain. Another reminder that systems share a neighborhood. Emptying before a heavy lift is less about the bladder. Moonlighting as a weight belt, and more about comfort and keeping continence margins wide when pressure spikes. When your abs go full drama, the pelvis gets the group text, bladder included. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this, subscribing helps the channel, and now we pick up where the thread left off. Ready for the chemistry receipts? Number 7, chemistry window. Renal filtration and tubular processing decide what lands in the urine stream in the first place. The bladder is the holding tank that makes a timed sample possible. What you void is the delayed broadcast of what recently cleared kidney handling. Hydration shifts color and concentration in ways you can see. Clinicians have leaned on urinalysis as one of the most common labs on Earth because the specimen is right there when you void. Drug and metabolite screens piggyback on predictable excretion windows. Always kidney chemistry first, bladder logistics second. Timed assays want first morning urine. Timing is baked into the assay design. The bladder does not invent the chemistry, it cues the shipment. Kidney edit, bladder cue, toilet premiere. Your least private lab report held for you until you are ready to read it. Thanks for watching. Which one surprised you the most? If you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. See you.